Wars Theory put out a tweet and a video saying he has never seen fandom more united now at how bad this is. This is where, I mean, yes, the funeral thing, kind of a joke, I know. However, I think it has the potential to be so big, to trend on social media, to get the attention of the trades, the press, that this is fandom uniting, saying enough is enough. You have damaged this franchise beyond repair. The only reaction, really possible thing you could do is put this franchise on ice and wait 5 years to come back and get rid of the entirety of the current creatives in charge, including Filoni, which everyone thought was the next George Lucas. I don't believe that anymore. So before we go to, we got a lot of social. What's that? I want to hear your thoughts on all of that. Like, this is fandom. I've never seen. Everyone's united. Like, yeah, this is bad. Even normies are noticing.
I will say that one thing that has actually given me hope and that has really entertained me in this whole situation is the fans themselves, the real fans. And we've really come together, and what they are doing is providing us what Disney won't, which is quality Star Wars entertainment. And yes, it's sad what's going on with Disney in their treatment of George Lucas's IP, but the fans have taken over and are providing us with entertainment. Star Wars Theory is doing fan fiction stuff. He's writing his own like Vader series, and I saw his Heir to the Empire snippet the other day, and I saw another channel that's doing an anime of Heir to the Empire series that looks amazing. Like, we've really united in that way too, but they're also, the fans are the ones giving us what we've been asking for this whole time that Disney refuses to do. So it's sad in that respect, but it's been really nice to see the fans really come together like this.
Look to the past. All those books they got rid of, that is Star. See, I've completely compartmentalized. Jesus, sorry. Everything talking about Star Wars. Star Wars is alive and well. Just everything before Disney bought it is Star Wars. The 6 movies and any bit of EU that doesn't conflict with those 6 movies is Star Wars. Luke's married, Mara Jade, kids, Jaina and Jason Solo. Actual strong, well-written characters. Everything that Disney has done is just legal fiction. It's just legal fiction. They will never double down, because that would be admitting that their ideology, which is what basically pushes everything they do. And if you want any more proof than that, just listen to Leslie actually say what she's talking about this and how she was interested in the Sith and the power. Interesting that she would be interested in the power dynamics of a master and apprentice relationship. But yeah, everything they say, the queer interview where she said queer like 7 times in 3 seconds. They're not interested in telling Star Wars of any canon. That's the other thing. We all consider Star Wars canon very different. I guess that Script Doctor probably doesn't consider the prequels very canon-like. I do. Some people just say it's only the original trilogy. Some people, we all have different views on what Star Wars is. I personally say it's anything George Lucas did, but that's just me.
Chris, there's something in the panel. There's something that I find, and it really sort of coalesced watching this. All of these legacy IPs, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's James Bond, there's an idea that I think is inherent of our entire culture, meaning all of Western civilization, the entire canon of Western civilization, whether it's literature, playwrights, Shakespeare, all of what brought us to where we are now as a culture. There's an agenda that it's all bad. Because in some way, shape, or form, it is oppressed. All of Western civilization was built on the backs of people that were oppressed. Yeah. And now I have no problem hearing. I love hearing stories from anybody that I haven't heard a story from before. But I feel that now there are people. There are powerful forces at work across culture that have a vested interest in seeing the West taken apart. And the thing is, our art is what defines our culture. It's what examines our culture. It reflects our culture back to us. And popular entertainment, which is global, you subvert that by bringing the agendas of marginalized people who are, let's face it, they want to see the people that oppress them destroyed. Yeah. And what we're getting in our entertainment, and I don't mean to be some conspiracy theorist, but you know what? If you've been beat up by the bully, One of
They,
the
they say
oldest
it out loud.
Oh, yeah, well, one of the oldest stories in the world is to see the tables on that bully turned. The problem is the very culture that we've existed in that gave rise to all of us, is the culture that gave us the original Star Wars and Star Trek and Doctor Who and James Bond. You know, whether James Bond is a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a product of the Cold War, well, those movies worked until the latter half of the Daniel Craig era. If you want to mention them by money, okay, but I don't think anyone was particularly satisfied by No Time to Die. By the time you've totally dismantled the hero and turned him into a mopey guy that accepts his fate and dies after failing for an entire movie in Skyfall and letting his boss get murdered. But I think what we're seeing with Star Wars is, on one hand, it's great that marginalized people get to speak and they get to have voices and they get to tell their tales. But they're doing it now by subverting the tales that other people told. And they're being allowed to do it by corporations that think of those stories as product. They don't delineate. They just figure if we put Star Wars on it, it's going to make money. And let's find people, whether those people are the right fit for the IP that they're going to be in control of. A corporation doesn't, they don't know how to do that. There's no metric to measure that. Somebody had a successful, I love Russian Doll. I thought that was a great show. Let's bring the person that made that show over to work on Star Wars. On paper, that looks great. But in theory, that's one thing. But in practice, how do you vet people and see if they really love this property? Everybody's deconstructing these legacy franchises that have existed. Let's face it, they were created in a very different time. And those stories relied on myth making that is a part of Western civilization back hundreds of years, if not thousands. But now everybody wants to change things based on what's been going on the last 10 years. And it's ruining the stories.
But it would be different. It would be different if they didn't have the EU. Derek mentioned this in a show the other day. They had the EU that they could have. That was a
so did Star Trek, by the way.
Right. They have a blueprint of what basically of how they could have built this universe, right? And they made a decision. They chose not to do that, right? Instead, they acted like they had no idea what they were doing, or they acted like it. They knew what they were doing, right? Everything they did was agenda pushed.
But you know what's interesting about that, Verbal, is that when you look at all these books, especially because Star Trek has a lot of great books, Star Wars has great books, Doctor Who has great books, they were written by people that love these franchises. And when they extrapolated on things, they were basing their extrapolations on things that they love. They said, okay, if this is true in our universe, if A, B, C, and D are true, I want to get to, E, F, G, H, I. How do I make those feel realistic? And I read a lot of Star Trek novels, and the best Star Trek writers go out of their way to make their stories feel germane to the universe as it was created by the previous creators. Whereas now we're seeing the exact opposite happen. I would say why aren't, now we're watching like, hey, they stole Thrawn. They called Timothy Zahn will tell you he was called to Lucasfilm for a meeting. They had already used the character and put him in animated shows, and they hadn't aired yet. But then they said, hey, we wanted to use your character. So they took Grand Admiral Thrawn, but they didn't even use the origin or the character as written in Timothy Zahn's novels. They took that character and made it something of their own, even though it wasn't.
Paycheck, and he rewrote his character far lesser, I would argue, for Disney canon before saying he wouldn't, because there's a lot of characters that got stolen by previous actors and they did not get money or royalties, which is the big conspiracy of that's why they got rid of the EU. The whole point of it is there was a very well-established EU, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books and comics and games that actually, for the most part, the whole thing about Star Trek, Star Wars. Star Trek had a bunch of good books, but a lot of them did contradict each other. Star Wars, to its best, did try to not contradict, and the rule was as long as it didn't contradict the movies, and then there was like a level of canon. So there was an established 30,000 years worth of timeline going back that they could have even badly taken, and they're not even badly ripping it off. They're horribly ripping it off. And in Dave Filoni's case, he pretends it's his ideas, and he was even caught doing this on camera before someone pointed out that's from the expanded universe. He was like, oh yeah, I guess we did take that.
That
So-
was Lucas's daughter.
I thought he was proud of stealing ideas. He advertised that he stole Gandalf's arc for
Yeah, they're
Ahsoka.
not the shepherds
Yeah.
of George Lucas.
Dune
How many
for
times must they prove that? All they're here to do
For
is
Ahsoka?
steal the EU. Yeah, no, Gandalf, the whole
He's
arc that
proud
he's
of
done
it.
twice, that he did twice, right? He did it in the cartoon, then he did it in live action. And he
To
made her the
Filoni, it's
star.
all tall tales. It doesn't
This is-
matter. Continuity doesn't matter.
But I would be
whole thing
okay
should be
if they did it
Luke's
right.
story.
Like if they stole it and did it right, I'd be okay with that. Tarantino
Nobody
steals a bunch of stuff, and I love all his movies.
This should be Luke's
All we
story
want
right
is
now.
good Star Wars, right? That's all we want. That's all we care about. I don't care who makes it. I don't care who steals from what. It's like I said, we had the entirety of the EU. All you had to do is figure out what is it we want to adapt. Do we want to adapt Shadows of the Empire? Do we want to adapt Heir to the Empire? Do we want to adapt this video game? Do we want to do a film, or do we want to do a TV show? Those should have been the tough decisions. The easy decision was to do the EU almost word for word, because you already had a built-in fan base that was like dying to watch that.
Nah,
That's what
bro,
we
Ray
thought we were going
Palpatine.
to
Sorry, Ray Palpatine. That's what we
Well,
can give you.
Yeah.
another
Like
thing, though,
Warner
is-
saga
appropriating
turns
it.
into the Palpatine saga. He was right. His lineage goes on. Chosen it wasn't the chosen one, right? There's a bunch of twins. They were the original chosen ones. Oopsie. I guess Osha and May need to come back and do what Anakin failed to do. Like, it's an abomination. And they did. You know, the reaction we're having is what they wanted. We lived in an age of heroes. When we all grew up, we've mentioned it, we lived in an age of heroes, and they've systematically assassinated every single one and replaced them with the Captain Marvels and the Ray Palpatines and the all the beta males, and we've all rejected it. And we can't all be racist and bigots and homophobic. You can't all have internalized racism for rejecting any, like, it can't work on all of us. So clearly their ideology is not working. Just write good characters, but they can't, because what they think is good to us ain't good. And that's
there are
the lack of
examples
value.
It's a
that
lack of
totally-
creativity. It's a lack of the ability to tell good stories, and that's
Or
the major
will.
issue. That's going throughout all of Hollywood, really, because they
Yeah.
couldn't take their ideas on their own and just go out there and just make something brand new and original. They have to attach it to some sort of a giant franchise, because otherwise nobody's going to pay any attention to this crap.
Yes.
Everybody's just going to reject it right out of hand. Like, what is this? Like, if the Acolyte had to stand on its own at this moment in time, who would be watching the Acolyte? We certainly wouldn't be watching it. Some people might check in and say, "Hey, look, this really this looks like
Ahsoka
it might
barely
be
stood
interesting."
up. I
If
watched
this
that
didn't have
show.
Star Wars attached to it, no one would
You know what I'm saying? I
pay
watched
any attention
Rebels.
to it or like it.
I liked Ahsoka, and I watched the live action. I was like, I don't like this at all. I don't care about these characters. So
Right.
even that failed.
Right.
That's Dave
yeah.
Filoni again, by the way, the savior who, at every moment when a horrible decision is made, he was the creative person that could have gone, no, that doesn't follow George's vision, and here's why. Instead, he went, there's other Force witches besides Night Sisters, and he enabled it.